good evening and welcome to Wednesday Night Live, coming to you from Pocatello, Idaho, in the beautiful Portneuf Valley in southeast Idaho, the gateway to the great Northwest. We have what I think you're going to find as an interesting program tonight, and since this is the last night that we will come to you before the election, which is next Tuesday, we obviously have some things to talk about. So with that, we'll talk briefly about a couple things, and then we're going to get right to the show. So first of all, as I do every week at this time, I want to remind you about Compassion and Hope Pregnancy Center, 208-478-4613. I just looked at my notes. I thought I had the wrong number. All these months I've been telling you about it, and I thought I had the number memorized, and I still had to cheat and go to my sheet. I am sorry. Compassion and Hope, as I've told you, is the antithesis, the opposite of everything Planned Parenthood. Compassion and Hope is about life. They're about helping struggling mothers, young mothers, people who are having difficulties getting ready for a new baby, sometimes a surprise baby, maybe a young couple that, for lack of a better term, got into trouble. Compassion and Hope is where they can go to get genuine help, not an abortion. That's not what they're about. But they need your help. So 478-HOPE, that's the way I always remember it, 478-HOPE. And remember, here in Pocatello, the whole state has one area code, 208. So if you're watching in Nevada or Oregon or wherever you are and you want to help, 478-HOPE, and that's area code 20. Now 208, they can use, obviously they can use finances. They don't get millions and millions of dollars, federal tax dollars, like Planned Parenthood does. They're on a very short budget. They need all the help they can get. So if you want to send them money, I'm sure they'd be glad to have it. But they will take any kind of help you have to offer. If you catch them when they're out of the office, because they are small and part-time, just leave a message where you can be reached, and someone will get back to you, and they will be grateful for whatever you can do. And speaking of Compassion and Hope, their one annual fundraiser is coming up. Now, I'm a little ahead of it, but I'm just going to read. I just got the poster today, and this is the third annual Walk for Life, and it's the free fundraising event, June 14th. So mark your calendar for June 14th, 10:30 a.m. till 1:30 p.m. at Raymond Park. And it's free to attend. You don't have to buy a ticket. And here's what you'll see. There's going to be entertainment. The Master of Ceremonies will be C.J. Morrison from KMGI Rock 102. So that ought to be very good. Live music by Dave Reichelt, John Young and his band. Free food, hot dogs, cotton candy, slushies, a bouncy house, coloring contest, face painting games, and more, something for everyone. There will be raffle tickets that are available for $5 each, or $5 for $20, and you can pick up the raffle tickets and walk donation sheets at Nitro Graphics, corner of Clark and 4th, and Double Shot Coffee, corner of Jefferson and Elm, or corner of Pole Line and Yellowstone. And on the day of the walk, you need not be present to win. One of the gifts, or one of the prizes, is a 48-inch JVC flat screen TV with Roku, $500 value, sponsored by MBCJ Old Faithful Landscaping and Sprinkler. And then a Kindle Fire HDX 7-inch tablet with quad-core processor with keyboard and case, a $350 value, sponsored by 21st Century Remodeling. And a mountain bike, a Chaparral 21-speed, $250 value. And these are some of the items that will be raffled off. So mark that again, if you would, please, for June 14th at 10:30 a.m. at Raymond Park. Now, I'm going to tell you about this every week until June 14th, or whatever my last broadcast is before then. But that's Compassion and Hope Pregnancy Center, and they can use all the help you can give them. And this, I was fortunate enough to MC last year, and we had a ball. They had a really good turnout. They had, I think they brought in something like $10 or $11,000 on that, and that's a big deal for a small organization like that. So you can help them. Well, as I mentioned earlier, this is the last program I will be able to do before the election. So we have a lot to cover, and I'm very, very fortunate to have an in-studio guest. You've seen him before, but I wanted to have an opportunity to talk to him one last time before the election. And so without further ado, may I introduce Robert Ballard. Robert, thank you very much for being back here again.
Well, thank you for the invitation, Ralph. I've been here a few times, talked about myself ad nauseum, but for all those in TV land who don't know anything about me, I'll give you a short bio. I was born at 8:45 a.m. October 17th at the LDS Hospital in Salt Lake City. I still have the bill that my mother was in the hospital 9 days, and there was a normal birth, and I was normal, and the bill was $32, and I still have it in my files. My dad was employed by the U.S. Army in the Reichland, and he was babysitting some field marshals and generals at Nuremberg before they were put on trial. He was a medical doctor, and he was giving them physicals, and they were complaining about their rations. I had a normal childhood. I was an Eagle Scout. I went to college at the University of Utah. I graduated in history, which is very, very interesting. But unless you go into teaching, there's not a whole lot of work out there, and particularly in the 60s there wasn't. I went to work for a drug wholesaler for a few years and realized after some time that I was going nowhere without some advanced business degrees. I wanted to go into business. I went back to college and received degrees in accounting and business administration. My first accounting job just happened to be for the Kempthorne family, which has some Idaho roots to it. I ended up becoming the general manager, and they had a small, it wasn't small, it was a medium-sized surgical supply chain of stores. I left there to become CEO of Tommy Lasorda's spaghetti sauce factory. My suggestion to anybody out there, never work for a celebrity. They are all not nice people. They have very large egos, and it's the only job I was ever fired from. And they actually brought in a couple of goons and threw me out of the building. I went to work as a CEO of a truck stop where there was 55 to 60 employees, which is another very interesting job. There's so many things that go on to an all-night truck stop that the owner and I were going to try to write a sitcom about it. There were so many funny things that went on. I had tried working for others, and at that time it was about time for me to work for myself. So I bought a small electronics manufacturing company in which we manufactured gauges that go on the outside of water tanks for RVs and boats. I moved to Idaho with the company almost 20 years ago, and I brought with me several jobs. After several years, I sold the company and tried to retire. That was a very large mistake. I was too young to retire. Also, during this period, I was an initial investor in Citizens Community Bank and served on the board until it was sold in 2005. 2008, I got involved in Republican politics in Bannock County. I had been involved in Republican politics since I was in high school. In fact, I just found a 1962 cover of George Romney that I used to carry to school, and the kids made fun of me. Anyway, that's the...
Well, now I want to interrupt you here because you've got so much stuff there that every time you come up with something new, there's something else I want to talk to. But I've got a remark about Tommy Lasorda because I've dealt with Mr. Lasorda, and yes, boy, he is not a nice guy.
He is he's not a nice man. I spent one of the worst afternoons in my life in his attorney's office. His attorney had 3 clients, and they were all 3 celebrities. One of them, I won't mention who they were, but let's just say that it was a very, very difficult experience. And why I got fired, they had 2 companies, and one company was stealing from the other company. They were going to bankrupt the one and keep all the assets in the other, where Tommy had his money. And I said I wouldn't go along with it, so out the door I went.
Yeah, that honesty is not always rewarded.
No.
when it interferes with this kind of business.
But that's all right. I couldn't stand another day there.
My son worked for the Dodgers years ago as a bat boy, and he's told me some stories about Lasorda. And I thought, yeah, that sounds like the Tommy Lasorda I know and don't love. Not surprised. And you're right. These big shot guys all have big shot egos. I want to go
Huge
back
egos.
to something you were. I thought it was interesting, and it really has nothing to do with your qualifications for this job, but I find it interesting because it does kind of influence your thinking in a way. Your dad was a medical doctor in the Reichsland in Germany, and he was babysitting the guys that tried to conquer the world. And they were unhappy because they weren't getting the diet they wanted. Did I understand that correctly?
Yeah, I think they were only getting 900 calories or 1,200 calories. I can't remember exactly. I've got it. I've got the story written down. But he actually had examined Field Marshal von Rundstedt before he went on trial, and he complained of some ailment that if you had more calories, it would cure it.
It's called hunger.
Yeah. Yeah. And my dad spoke German very well, and the ailment was something to do with your arm. And he told the field marshal to put his arm up in English, and it was translated by some guy. And then he told him in German to put it down, and he barked it out to him. And von Rundstedt slapped his shoulder down, which you couldn't have done if you had that particular ailment that he was complaining about.
In the best military tradition, yes. Yeah. That's amusing.
He said he was a very small, short man, and he always got a kick out of that. But he did give physicals and prepped a lot of people for Nuremberg.
And of course, Goering
hereafter.
Goering could lose some weight. He was quite a big guy. But
Goering got his just reward.
Yes,
too.
he did. Well, now there are a number of things. Boy, there's so much in your bio to cover. But I want to go forward. Now, you said you have a degree in history and a degree in economics. Do I have that right?
No.
Or business?
Accounting and business administration.
Okay, and this I think is important because there are a couple of things we're touching on here that I feel are important for the office that you're running for, which is county clerk. Certainly honesty and integrity, and you kind of showed that at your expense by saying you weren't going to go along with this theft, basically. And it would have been very easy for a young man who had stars in his eyes and wanted to go someplace to say, "Sure, Mr. Lasorda, whatever you want," and yet you chose to take the honorable way out, and that certainly is commendable. And then, while you were still quite young, you put together your own company, the electronics company.
Well, actually, I bought the patent from this, and the guy was virtually a rocket scientist.
Yeah.
He worked for Rockwell and worked on part of the Hellfire missile. And apparently, I don't quite understand these things, but apparently when you work in these very high-tech defense plants, the guy next door to you doesn't know what you're doing. You don't know what the next guy is doing.
Yeah.
So he didn't even know he was working on the Hellfire missile. And he found out and he quit because he was a pacifist.
Oh, I see. Okay.
And he invented this gauge that would read water levels through plastic containers. And so you wouldn't have anything intrusive into the tank. And I bought the patent, and we started making them. About that time, my uncle, who was one of the greatest influences in my life, was building his plant up here.
Now, what plant are we talking about? This is
Ballard Medical Plant.
Okay, on the hill. Yeah.
Yeah, and he talked to me and sort of convinced me to come to Pocatello. He thought it was a very nice place. He had a plant in his hometown of Draper, but it was outgrowing itself. And at that time, don't hold me this story, but I believe Micron was going to put a plant in Lehigh, which is just below Draper, and he was going to suck up all the labor. Micron was going great guns at that point in time. The plant never got built, or it got built and never got staffed, I can't remember. And he ended up not having the problem he thought he had, but he built the plant up here. And I might mention that it was in the buy-sell agreement with Kimberly-Clark that there would not be a job moved out of Pocatello or out of the United States until he passed, and he passed in 2005. And I believe that's when they started sending people to Mexico. But he was a great American, served with Patton in the Third Army all the way across Europe. He told me one time, I complained about being cold when I was in college, and he looked at me and he said, he called everybody son. He said, son, you don't know what cold is until you wade across the Rhine in March.
I imagine there's some truth to that.
And after reading about it, I think he's right.
Yeah. Now, I want to kind of focus on this for a moment because it certainly is germane to the job you're looking for, or the elected office, let me put it that way. Because you have experience in accounting. In other words, you know how to look for problems that may be there. You know how to interpret books, that kind of thing. You had now you were also on the board for Citizens Community Bank.
Correct.
So you certainly have banking experience. And then let's see, you went someplace from that. I lost. I guess what I'm trying to point out here, and I don't need to draw it on a chalkboard, but it would seem to me that you are eminently qualified for the office of county clerk. You certainly know what the job is all about.
Well, I pulled this up from the county clerk's website, and it says hats of the county clerk. And it's clerk of the district court, jury commissioner, and elections officer. Well, jury commissioner, I'm not exactly sure what you do with that except select juries out of a list, I would suppose. But election officer is very, very important. And I have a little tale to tell about a particular election. There's been rumors in Bannock County for years that the elections are not fair and square. And I was involved with one of them, and I don't want to make this sound like sour grapes, but in 2010, absentee ballots are counted the day of the election, and they have an equal number of Democrats and Republicans in a room basically opening the envelopes and putting them in stacks, not counting the actual contents of the ballots, but counting the ballots themselves. And then they stack them all together, 3 Republicans, 3 Democrats, and a couple of people from the county verify the number of ballots. Well, I have a letter here that was written by the chairman of the party that I just found out about 3 months ago.
The chairman of the Bannock County Republicans?
Right, in 2010. And it was sent to the Attorney General and Secretary of State. Now follow this very closely, folks. The absentee ballots were taken over and put into the computer. 3,498 went into the computer, 3,694 come out of the computer, which means 201 more come out than went in. And I lost by 199. Now, I believe in the tooth fairy and a lot of things, but there's something wrong with that. And if I become county clerk, I'm going to go into the election process and study it very carefully and make sure that the elections are fair and there's any transparency, all the transparency that anybody wants in those elections. This letter was sent. There was a meeting of a representative from the Secretary of State on the Friday after the election who come over and talked to the chairman of the party, chairman of the Democratic Party, Dale Hatch, who was the Democratic clerk, and not me. I wasn't allowed in the room. Now, the county clerk had certainly a vested interest in the outcome, and I was not allowed in the room to see what was going on. And basically, I don't know whether this letter was ever sent or not. Nothing was ever done about it. No response was ever given. No explanation was ever given to me about the how things turned out. There was a ballot box that was found 3 days after the election, and we know it wasn't counted because Ralph and his wife's ballots were actually in it
as well
when
as
they
another
opened it up.
23 beyond that.
So we have some problems. It's been 4 years, and now we have a new election clerk, and I won't go into why, but she seems to be trying very hard, and she certainly gave me some assistance when I asked for some information. She tried very hard to fulfill my requests, and as far as I'm concerned, she's doing a great job. But I have questions about that machinery they have over there. I have questions about the way things were done in the past.
Well, and this is good because as the county clerk you should have questions, and one of the things that was very troubling to me is Dale Hatch didn't have any questions.
No. Well, you should recuse yourself when you're the clerk and you're running. He should have been out of the room, and the Secretary of State himself should have been down here.
Yeah. And he wasn't. He couldn't be bothered, so he sent a rubber stamp down to.
It was just. It was sort of a joke.
Well, it's certainly, and the joke's on us because obviously Bannock County is suffering or has suffered because of. And you know, we could put a lot of hats on it. I don't want to be too direct. You know, I'm pretty direct, so I'm just going to say, perhaps there was some mismanagement. And I think it's important that we have somebody in that office that understands management, as you certainly do, and understands, well, there are lots of ways to cook the books, and maybe there was some book cooking. I don't know. I remember the day they brought that can in. That's very interesting because after the absentee votes were counted, and we may have shared this, let me just, we mean you and I, but I'm going to reiterate. I sat in on the 2008 counting of the ballots, and so I'm quite familiar with it, and I remember at the time there were some real questions in the absentee ballot counting at that time that I was so new at what they were doing, I really didn't understand it, but it was a novel process. But one of the things they did as a so-called or supposed safety feature is when all the ballots have been taken out of the metal cans that they keep them in, after everything has been counted and accounted for, then they show everybody the can to show that the can has been emptied. And then it's supposed to be locked up and put away. Well, lo and behold, as Robert pointed out, 3 days after the election, they found a can. And unfortunately, all of the cans had been accounted for, so what can? Where did this come from? And it had 25 ballots, unopened ballots in it. Not mentioning the 199 phantom ballots that somehow were in there. So without wanting to beat it to death, folks, we need an honest, capable, managerial, well-educated county clerk, somebody who has the interest of not the party, because Robert is not running for the party. Robert is running, and I say this because I'm kind of taking your lines, but I know Robert, and I remember that election. I remember the percentage point that it was changed by, and I also remember the interest that was shown by certain parts of the Republican leadership to make sure that the Democrat got elected. I could go much further than that. I won't. No need to right now. But it was interesting, and so we certainly need somebody with value and character that has seen the way this thing can be.
Yeah, and like I say, I'm not bringing up sour grapes. I'm bringing it up for a point that things need to be looked into. I go on with the hats of the county clerk, and he's also the auditor, budget officer, chief financial officer, and accountant for all county revenues and payments. That's all I've done all my life, folks, is I was an accountant, and I've gone through more audits than the last two guys or the last three guys who were in that chair. I know how to run an audit. I know how to set it up. I can account for things. I can produce financial documents. I've done it for years and years and years. And now I'll bring in another story that makes me wonder what's going on. 3 years ago, I believe, either 2 or 3, there was a levy for an ambulance. Was it a physical ambulance plus the staff?
That's as I understand it, yes.
Okay. And I remembered it as it being about $680,000 or $90,000 that it was an additional levy. Is that what it was?
Yeah, we have been levied. I mean, there's an
Okay.
extra tax there.
So that would allow for an extra ambulance and a crew of 6. You can't run one with 2. You can't expect the guys to work 168 hours a week. So you have to have 6 guys to run the ambulance. Well, certain parts of the county claimed the sky was going to fall if we didn't get this ambulance. So they had an open meeting for the citizens. And one of the commissioners ran the meeting, and he opened it up, and we had the usual people there. The fire department was there saying they really needed this. They couldn't operate without it. The calls were stacking up, and that may very well be true. I don't know. I'm not in the call center. Then we had the other side that said, why don't we use volunteers? Why can't we squeeze the budget someplace else and save this money someplace else and put it in the buy the people and the equipment that way? Well, I waited till close to the end of the meeting, which was about an hour, and I wandered up and gave him my name. And in the room was the chief financial officer for the county and the city, both of them. I said, can anyone tell me what the Medicare reimbursement for an ambulance ride is? And there was complete silence. And I looked both at the chief financial officer for the city and the county, still silence. Then finally, the gentleman, the doctor who runs the program, I don't know his name.
I don't recall his name, but
he says, well, we think it's around $85. I said, you think? This is the point. If you don't know what revenues you're coming in or what you're paying out, how do you know you need $680,000? I know 3 people that were hauled in an ambulance during that year that the county billed about between $480 and $510 for the ride. Don't they collect that? Is that not enough? Doesn't that cover it? I don't know. But the point was that nobody in the room and the doctor was just guessing that Medicare was paying $85. Elect me, and I'm going to find out how much it is.
And I'm glad you said that, because that brings me to a point. And why should we elect you? Now, hopefully some of these things I've made obvious, and certainly you have. But
the main reason is I'm qualified.
That's where I was. You can't get more direct than that.
I've done almost everything on here. I haven't secured a jury. I haven't done that, but I don't think that's beyond me.
I don't believe the other 2 people running for office have either. So
no,
I think that's
and I haven't signed county warrants, but I still can sign my name pretty well, even though it's getting shaky as I get ancient.
Now, you're not, one of the things that, and Robert and I have discussed this before, we discussed it before the last election. One of the things, and you didn't bring it up, so I'm going to bring it up, he's not looking for a career. He's not looking for a job. He doesn't need this to feed the bulldog. Believe it or not, there are still people in our community who, for altruistic reasons as well as others, really do want to serve, and they have the qualifications to serve. And I think, and I don't want to
That's absolutely true. I only want to do it for public service. I don't care about the money. I don't care about Percy. I don't care about health insurance. I'm covered 2 different ways. I don't need health insurance. I have some ideas that I want to inject into the county to help straighten things out and make it more transparent, make more accountability to the people. I mentioned my uncle. He's one of my greatest influences on my life. No matter how successful and how much money he made, he was never too busy to talk to me. And he told me one time, he said, you should never be a CEO for more than 10 or 12 years. You just run out of ideas. And we've had a clerk here that was a clerk for 26 years. And the last one was a clerk for 10 or 12 years. Now, after 4 or 5 years or 6 years? Do you have any good ideas? I don't know.
Well, there's another aspect, and I'm glad you mentioned that because it brings up one other thing, and that is our last clerk had some difficulty with being in the office. He didn't seem to think that it was necessary to put in an 8-hour day.
As one, I will pledge to the citizens of Bannock County that I will be there 40 hours a week, and I will serve out the term. I will not pull the Bannock County switch, which I guarantee will happen in the next 2 years for some office. I will not do that. I will serve out the whole term. So you will not get a replacement for me. You'll have to vote me out.
And
or carry me out in a bag, one or the other.
And there's one added dimension, and this is a personal observation. We have shared with you before our disappointment with the so-called establishment Republicans. Well, I can guarantee you that the good old boys, the establishment Republicans, are not doing their best to promote Robert. They don't like anybody that's going to disrupt their apple cart. And so if you're looking for a refreshing new honesty in the office of county clerk, and you think that maybe the good old boys have owned the county long enough, I think that maybe you have something to offer there.
Well, I hope so, and I'm not looking to round up people and file embezzlement charges on them. I'm just looking to make it more efficient. I think I have some ideas to do that. I think the people in the county deserve that every dollar that flows through the county should be accounted for properly, and audit trails should be set up for certain things. I really believe that.
Well, it would be refreshing to have somebody in the office that actually is trained to do the job and then plans to be there every day to do the job. So any last comments you'd like to make, Robert?
No, it's all I've done my whole life, except when I retired I raised pheasants for a while. And that was about as distasteful as Tommy Lasorda. And
well, Robert,
that's it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for the time, Ralph.
I appreciate your being on the show tonight. We've been talking with Robert Ballard. Now, Robert's not an unknown person, but there's so many things about him that are still, this is why I asked him if he'd be on the show, because this is the last opportunity he's going to have to talk to you and me about what he has to offer. And I have to be honest with you, now I don't know this fellow Pilecki. All I know about Pilecki, the fellow who Hatch stepped down to make sure that they got another guy in there, I've never met the man. I wouldn't know him if I ran into him in the market. I don't know him. And all I know is what I read in the paper, and he seems like a nice guy, and he seems like he wants to be here. I don't know what those qualifications are there. The only other person that I'm familiar with that is running is Dave Bowen, and Dave Bowen is well known by a lot of people. A lot of people think very highly of him, but Dave Bowen doesn't quite have these qualifications. And I don't say that in any other vein except you need to do your homework. Take a look at Dave Bowen's site. I looked at his site. A lot of people said nice things about him, but I didn't see anything that qualified him to be the county clerk, any more than I remember Dale Hatch very well. Dale Hatch's claim to fame prior to his being set up in the county clerk's office was that he worked, I think, as a maintenance specialist or something for the school district, Marsh Valley Schools or something like that. He had no background, none. But some folks wanted him in there, and he got in there. So I would say that we need to be very, very careful when we go to the polls on all of the candidates, the issue, and do your homework. Don't take my word for it. My word is as good as anybody else's, or maybe not. But I think if you take a look at the qualifications and the abilities of the people running, it's open and shut case for Robert Ballard for county clerk. That's my opinion. Now, we're going to there have been several developments in the last, let's say the last 24 hours that are very interesting. And you're very well aware that this next Tuesday is the election for elected offices, as well as for Proposition 1. Proposition 1, as you know, is the result of the referendum that was pushed through a petition process to have the question about this so-called non-discrimination ordinance, have it go before you, the people. Instead of just the 4 people who decided to inflict this upon the county, We successfully were able to get a referendum to have this put on the ballot so everybody would get a say. Well, the mustard hit the propeller as we kind of expected it would. Not in quite the ways we did, and it's really interesting to see how people are moving sideways and moving in directions that we didn't expect from them. Now tomorrow, I understand there's going to be an article in the Idaho State Journal, and I don't have all the details on it, but there has been some confusion. Let me try to be polite about it and not be my usual lightning rod self. There has been some confusion on the mayor's stand and what he is or is not supporting and who he has spoken to about not supporting or supposedly supporting. And so the mayor issued a statement today. I'm going to read it to you. I got this over the email wire, if you will. It's on the official letterhead from the city, dated May 14th, 2014. Statement from Mayor Brian Blad, City of Pocatello. And I quote, "On May 20, 2014, citizens of Pocatello will be casting their vote regarding the citizen-initiated referendum to repeal City Ordinance number 2921, known as the Non-Discrimination Ordinance. It has been reported that I both support and oppose the ordinance. I would like to clarify that I have not made any public statement either in opposition to or support of the referendum. As mayor of Pocatello, I swore an oath to uphold the laws of the city. I have stated that I will enforce all ordinances. I have also urged all citizens to take this opportunity to vote and have their voice be heard." And it doesn't have his signature because it's an email, but this is the letter or the press release that came out just this afternoon, and you won't see it until tomorrow in the newspaper, but this is the release that the mayor has put forth. Now, why is that coming out? Well, I'm going to withhold some comments that I have to make about why that's coming out until I see the story in the Idaho State Journal tomorrow. But I do want to remind you of a couple of things. And the first thing I want to remind you of, now many of you may have seen this door hanger. You may have got this at your place of residence. It says, "Vote yes to repeal." And it is obviously an effort by the voteyespocatello.com, and you should go to that site just to inform yourself, voteyespocatello.com. And this door hanger is supplied by the committee, for lack of a better term, to obviously to influence your vote, to get your attention on some of the issues involved. I'd like to just read something on here. There are a lot of misconceptions about what this ordinance does or does not. The one significant fact, and there are several, but one significant fact in our local ordinance that makes it very unique compared to all the other ordinances in the state, and I think there are 6 other cities who have bent under pressure, so to speak. Ours is the only ordinance that makes it a criminal offense if you are charged and convicted. And you might be aware also that if you, as a landlord or a business owner or a minister, there are so many places that you are vulnerable. If you are charged, if someone decides to go to the police and make a report that you have disrespected them because of their gender or their gender identification or their sexual identity or however it is done in so many different parlance, then you are guilty until proven innocent. Now, that's not our system of jurisprudence, but in this case, in this ordinance, it is. A person can accuse you of being a homophobe, a bigot, or whatever they want to call you, to go to the police department, file a police report. The police department has to follow up on it, and you will be invited, I don't know how they are going to do this, but you will be invited to a mediation session. And you will be invited to pay $250 for the privilege of saying, "I didn't do it." And then if it isn't settled at that point, then the city will pay $250 of our tax money, those of us who live in the city. Not until the 3rd round, if that's the way they do it, will the accuser have to pay a nickel. Now, I find that interesting because if you have to pay $250 up front, then you've already been told you're guilty. You're guilty just because the guy or the person has charged you, and you're going to pay for it. Now, if it goes the full place, and we're going to have to cut this short a little bit, but if it goes the full gamut, and if you do go to court, then you have to spend your money and your resources, your time, your treasure, to defend yourself. Doesn't matter if you're innocent, you have to prove it. If you are unsuccessful in proving your case, and if the plaintiff wins, then you can be fined $1,000, up to $1,000, and or put in jail for up to 6 months. So you could be fined, jailed, or both. And you will then be considered, you will then have a misdemeanor conviction as a criminal misdemeanor. Think about the ramifications of just think about what that means for a moment. You can be fined for a matter of conscience, if you will, or because somebody didn't think you were treating them respectfully because of their gender identification. You can go to jail for this very thing, and you have a criminal record. So next time you go down to get your concealed weapon permit, you will have to put down that you are a convicted misdemeanor, that you have been convicted of a crime. Next time you take out any loans or file any official documents that require your signature, and it says, have you ever been convicted of a crime? Yes, you have. If you're convicted here, you are then a convicted misdemeanor. You have been convicted of a crime. This is a heavy repercussion because somebody didn't like the way you did or did not identify them by their gender identification or whatever it is. You need to think about that. Now, what was said about this last year, before this was really ramrodded through in last June, and when Steve, how quickly we forget. Anyway, Steve on the city council, and I'm thinking ahead of myself, so I'm losing his name. Steve decided that this is something we all needed to live with, and he cast the deciding vote after doing his usual tap dance and his, oh, my daddy told me, oh, my goodness gracious, I'm for it. And then he sold us down the river, in my opinion. That's the way I characterize it. But there were a couple of votes before it got to that point. And at one of those, well, I'll just give you in a public hearing, or not a public hearing, but in a public forum, let's call it a public forum, I'm quoting, why are we creating an ordinance when they, the police, haven't had a problem or a complaint? That's Mayor Blad. The one who you will read, that I just read to you, is about his position on this, which is no position. We have enough legislation to protect people. That was Councilman Johnston. These are quotes, quoting, I hate the thought of 6 months in jail for something like this. That was Councilman Craig Cooper. So the mayor had already gone on record thinking that this was a bad idea. Why are we creating an ordinance when they, the police, haven't had a problem, a complaint? That was the mayor last year. Something has changed his mind. Now businesses have been compelled to act against their will or be subject, and this is businesses, this is your property, subject to fines and jail, include photographers, bakers, florists, graphic designers, printers, owners of inns, bed and breakfasts, wedding facilities, fertility specialists, and adoption agencies that believe children have a right to both a mother and a father. Now, why is this so important? Well, there are a number of reasons. I'm going to show you something that if there are children in the room, I suggest that you not have them present. There's nothing visual here, there's nothing graphic here in a visual sense, but the language is quite disturbing. It is quite disturbing. Now, the reason I'm going to show you this is because you need to remember what this is all about. Now, this was read into the National Register, and I don't recall the date, a couple of years ago. It's on the, I believe it's on this disc we're going to play. It's only 3.5 minutes. Josh, are we good to go on that? All right, this is titled The Gay Manifesto. And after we show this, now listen carefully, and I urge you, don't have the children in the room because it's disturbing, but it is adult. And we are adults. We are going to be voting on the rest of our lives, so to speak. We need to face these things, even as ugly as this one can be. Now remember, this is not Ralph Lillig speaking. There is another person narrating, but this was a speech that was read into the National Register. This is a matter of national record. And this is what this person said. Let's show that, Josh.
This is the Gay Manifesto by Michael Swift, first published in Gay Community News, February 15th through the 21st in 1987. It is also reprinted in the Congressional Record. This is what it states. We shall sodomize your sons, emblems of your feeble masculinity, of your shallow dreams and vulgar lies. We shall seduce them in your schools, in your dormitories, in your gymnasiums, in your locker rooms, in your sports arenas, in your seminaries, in your youth groups, in your movie theater bathrooms, in your army bunkhouses, in your truck stops, in all your male clubs, in your House of Congress, whenever men are with men together. Your sons shall become our minions and do our biddings. They will be recast into our image. All laws banning homosexual activity will be revoked. Instead, legislation shall be passed which engenders love between men. All homosexuals stand together as brothers. We shall triumph only when we present a common face to the vicious heterosexual enemy. If you dare to cry faggot, it states, fairy, queer at us, we will stab you in your cowardly hearts and defile your dead, puny bodies. We will unmask the powerful homosexuals who masquerade as heterosexuals. You will be shocked and frightened when you find that your presidents and their sons, your industrialists, your senators, your mayors, your generals, your athletes, your film stars, your television personalities, your civic leaders, your priests, are not the safe, familiar heterosexual figures you assume them to be. We are everywhere. We have infiltrated your ranks. Be careful when you speak of homosexuals because we are always among you. We may be sitting across the desk from you. We may be sleeping in the same bed with you. All churches who condemn us will be closed. Our only gods are handsome young men. For us, too much is not enough. All males who insist on remaining stupidly heterosexual will be tried in homosexual courts of justice and will become invisible men. We shall rewrite history, history filled and debased with your heterosexual lies and distortions. We shall be victorious because we are filled with the ferocious bitterness of the oppressed who have been forced to play seemingly bit parts in your dumb heterosexual shows throughout the age. We too are capable of firing guns and manning the barricades of the ultimate revolution. Tremble, hetero swine, when we appear before you without our masks. Have you heard or read this article before? Why not?
Well, I don't think you can get much more explicit than that. And remember, these are not my words. I didn't make this up. In fact, this doesn't come out of the homosexualization of America. It doesn't come out of the after the ball. This is something separate from those, although obviously in some ways supportive. But it's one of those, slap on the face, cold water on the head wake-up calls, and you think, holy manoli. And this was read by this man who wrote it into the National Register. Now, we've been told since then that, well, he didn't really mean it. He was just angry. Really? Then why was it said? Why did he insist upon having it read into the National Register? I started a news article with you last week, and I'm going to read it again. I think we'll have enough time. But what's at stake here? Well, there's a lot at stake. And we're not talking about just your family. We're talking about your rights to speak out on things that you agree or disagree with, your individual conscience, your property rights. May 8th, CBS News, Benham Brothers respond after HGTV drops their show over anti-gay controversy. Remember that this law was supposedly passed to protect homosexuals, LGBT people, from whomever. Who needs the protection? Who is it that we're seeing in the paper all the time that's being attacked? People who are losing their jobs, losing their positions. We saw this fellow that was fired. He was CEO, just put in place as CEO of Mozilla, and summarily trashed because he had the audacity to have a personal opinion or a voice, and donated $1,000 to California's Proposition 8 a few years back, which was overturned by a judge who we later learned is a homosexual judge who was in a quote-unquote committed relationship. No proprietary interest there. Now we get this. Two brothers ousted by HGTV before their upcoming real estate show made it on the air, say that if their Christian faith cost them a shot at TV fame, then so be it. David and Jason Benham said Thursday they were disappointed that HGTV pulled the plug on Flip It Forward due to debut in October. After the network announced the show was upcoming, the lobbying group Right Wing Watch labeled David Benham an anti-gay, anti-choice extremist and reported on statements he made against homosexuality and gay marriage. When HGTV announced the series last month, it said, "Flip It Forward would follow the Benhams as they help deserving families transform fixer-uppers into their dream homes, with a dose of sibling rivalry from the brothers along the way." On Tuesday, the network said it was in the process of reviewing all information about the Benhams. A day later, it announced via Twitter and Facebook that it would not be moving forward with the series. So, dare to have an opinion or profess your Christian beliefs, and bada boom, bada bing, you're out of a job. You're out of a career. Remember what they did with the Duck Dynasty folks. It backfired on them, but they did it anyway. All right. Now, I want to, as a quick reminder, just a couple of things, and boy, we're kind of short on time. Let's just show a couple of these. Josh, are we ready on Elaine photography? Okay, let's roll this. It's about 5 minutes.
Growing controversy over the case of a staunchly Christian wedding photographer and her decision to refuse a job at a same-sex ceremony because of her faith. Elaine Huguenin and her husband say accepting the job would have been in conflict with their rights to practice their religion. But after the New Mexico Supreme Court ruled that their decision amounted to a case of discrimination, sounds like they've decided to take the fight even higher. Jordan Lawrence is senior counsel for the Alliance Defending Freedom and is representing the Huguenins in this case. Jordan, good to see you today.
Shannon, good to be here. Appreciate all your work and reporting at the Supreme Court.
Well, and this case may end up there. Let's start,
That's
though, with
right.
what you got from the New Mexico Supreme Court. Basically said in the opinions and concurrences, one of the bottom lines was, this is the price of citizenship. You have a right to practice your religion, but when it discriminates against someone else, it's the price of being a U.S. citizen.
Yeah, the price of citizenship does not mean giving up your constitutional rights. It is shocking to think that an artist or any American can be forced by the government to promote messages that they don't agree with. And it raises the question after a decision like this, do we as Americans have the right to live free of this kind of government restraint and coercion?
Well, and I want to read another part of this because so many parts of the opinion raise a lot of questions. The concurring judge in writing, Richard Boston, I believe is the justice here, he said that the Huguenins, the couple here, have to channel their conduct, not their beliefs, so as to leave space for other Americans who believe something different. What about the Huguenins?
Well, that's exactly right. In a free society, people of different beliefs have to learn how to get along. There were plenty of photographers available, willing to shoot this same-sex ceremony. They got them. The Huguenots just need to be excused. This can't be used in an authoritarian, coercive way to force people to basically promote the messages that they don't agree with.
And correct me if I'm wrong, I know at the lower court level, at least at one point, the Huguenins not only were found that they violated this human rights law in New Mexico, but also ordered to pay nearly $7,000 in attorney's fees to the couple who took them to court.
That is correct. And even though they were able to get photographs of their wedding that they were very satisfied with, they still wanted to send a message and make an example of Elaine photography and John and Elaine Huguenin.
Okay, so the bigger question here, you mentioned they found another photographer for their ceremony.
Yes.
There were plenty of others who are happy to photograph any ceremony, any situation.
Right.
But this couple has very specific objections because of their very deeply held personal beliefs. Do you think that there is a political move afoot here? Because this couple was very happy to find another photographer who did photographs I understand that they like. I know in New Mexico there is a big push on several fronts to have gay marriage legalized there. And that's something the voters or the lawmakers there will have to decide. But do you think that this particular case is not just about the photography, but it's about the bigger political goals?
Well, I think that it is. And I think throughout U.S. history, we have seen those in power, those promoting a prevailing orthodoxy, tend to want to silence those that disagree with them. And that's why the founders put the First Amendment in, to prevent the government from trying to silence or muzzle those that disagree with their opinions. And this is, to me, a clear overreach of government power. The New Mexico Supreme Court got it wrong, and that's why we're seriously considering taking this up to the U.S. Supreme Court.
All right, I want to read another bit of the concurring opinion here. It said, but when actions, even religiously inspired, conflict with other constitutionally protected rights, there must be some accommodation. What is the constitutionally protected right here? Because she wasn't performing weddings. She wasn't, which is not legal in New Mexico anyway. I mean, she was asked to photograph a commitment ceremony. Is it the constitutional right to photographs? I seriously am confused by what the judge is referencing there.
Well, I'm not exactly sure either. That, I mean, generally people, and I understand that there's public accommodation laws so that people can do business without being discriminated against. But these laws cannot be used in a way that force people to advocate ideas that they disagree with. There's certain professions that are different than a restaurant or a hotel that basically promote messages, a videographer, a speechwriter, a photographer, and to force them to say, you have to do things and promote messages with your skills that you disagree with. I think that's a right that all Americans are protected by. And those who object or support this decision and object to what Elaine Photography did must realize that there will be a day where they will find themselves in the same seat as Elaine Photography saying, I in good conscience cannot participate in this event. And there will be no constitutional protection unless the United States Supreme Court comes in and reverses this decision.
All right. Well, if you decide to take it there, let us know. We'll see you there. Jordan, thank you.
Thank you, Shannon.
All right, this is a reminder of why this ordinance is not in our best interest. Josh, can we wind up to one of the others rather quickly? We don't have time for the 2.5-minute one. I was thinking that could we go to number 4, the red number 4? It's only 30 seconds. Are we able to do that one? Oh, okay. I see somebody's got him tied up in the hallway. Well, okay. So much for that. Well, I would like to show you this other video, and basically this is the one that has to do with a transgender boy in the girls' locker room, and basically the girls don't want him there, and his rights transcend their rights, and so he gets to stay there, and this is already occurring in a school. Well, I urge you, please go to voteyespocatello.com. Write it down if you have to, voteyespocatello.com. Take a look at the information there because you have to be informed if you're going to make an informed decision. I'm urging you to vote yes on Proposition 1, which means you want to repeal it this next Tuesday. I just hope you will urge others to take a good, close look at what this means for this community. VoteYesPocatello.com. Repeal the ordinance. This is so important, and don't let this business that happened up in Boise about the marriage thing. Don't let that distract you. VoteYesPocatello.com. God bless you. Go to the polls Tuesday and vote yes on Proposition 1. Good night. Thank you for viewing.